Emily Carter was a quiet and humble woman who worked as a social worker in a small city. Most people knew her as the kind lady who helped anyone in need. She never spoke loudly, never demanded attention, and never showed off her work. Her days were long, but her heart stayed full because helping others was her way of life. One cold evening, she was driving home after visiting a poor family who had lost their home in a fire. She had taken food, blankets, and warm clothes for them. The back seat of her small car was full of boxes and bags marked with the name Carter Foundation. That was her charity. Started years ago with her savings to help people in hard times. The road was almost empty, and the night air was quiet. Emily felt tired but peaceful. She turned up the car heater and smiled softly, thinking about the little kids she had just helped. Then, suddenly, flashing red and blue lights appeared in her rearview mirror. A police car was following her with sirens on. Emily's heart jumped. She looked around, confused. She hadn't done anything wrong. She was driving slowly, obeying every rule. Still, she carefully pulled over to the side of the road, turned off the engine, and rolled down her window. 2 officers stepped out of the patrol car. One was older with a sharp tone, named Sergeant Miller. The other was young and restless, named Officer Dean. Miller approached her window and said, "Do you know why we stopped you?" Emily shook her head. "No, sir. I'm not sure." Miller frowned. "You ran a stop sign and were speeding." Emily blinked in surprise. "I'm sorry, sir. I didn't notice any stop sign." "Maybe you're mistaken." Her polite tone didn't help. The younger officer, Dean, walked around her car and shined his flashlight inside. "What's all this in the back seat?" he asked. Emily explained gently. "These are donation boxes. I help families who don't have homes. I was returning from a visit." But Dean laughed slightly and said, "That's a lot of stuff for one person. You sure you didn't pick these up from behind a store?" Miller crossed his arms and said, "Step out of the vehicle, ma'am." Emily felt a wave of embarrassment. The streetlight shone on her as she stepped out. A couple of neighbors peeked through their windows, watching the scene. She stood quietly as the officers opened her car doors and began looking inside. They searched through her boxes, her folders, and even her purse. Emily tried to speak. "Officer, please, my ID and paperwork are in the folder. You'll see my name on the foundation documents." Miller didn't look at her. "We'll decide that after we see what's in here." His voice was firm but not cruel, yet his tone carried disbelief, as if he had already judged her. Dean found her checkbook, which had Carter Foundation printed on it. He held it up with a small smirk. "You run a foundation? That's a fancy word for someone with boxes in her car." Emily felt her cheeks burn. She had worked so hard for years to build trust in her community, and now she was being treated like a liar. Still, she didn't raise her voice. "Please, if you just call your captain, he will confirm my name." Miller waved his hand. "We don't need to call anyone yet. We'll bring you in for questioning." Emily looked down at the ground. She didn't argue. She only nodded softly. Inside, she felt a deep sadness, not because of fear, but because she realized how quickly people could judge someone without knowing them. The officers told her to follow them to the station. She drove slowly behind their car, her hands tight on the steering wheel. When they arrived, the station was quiet, only a few officers on night duty. Emily sat on a bench while they filled out forms. She wasn't angry, just tired. Dean whispered something to another officer, and they laughed quietly. She could tell they thought she was pretending to be someone important. Emily folded her hands and kept her eyes on the floor. 2 hours passed. No one offered her water or even asked if she was okay. She was thinking about her mother, who always told her, "Even when people hurt your pride, don't lose your grace." Finally, an officer said she had to appear before the night judge for a brief hearing. Emily followed them to a small courtroom inside the station. The clock showed was past midnight. The judge, an older woman named Judge Ramirez, looked tired but alert. She adjusted her glasses and read the file the officers handed her. "Name?" she asked. "Emily Carter," Miller answered before Emily could speak. "We caught her with several boxes of unknown goods. Claims they're donations. Couldn't verify." The judge looked up at Emily. "Miss Carter, is this true?" Emily nodded slightly. "Yes, Your Honor. They're donations for the Carter Foundation." The judge froze for a moment. "Carter Foundation?" she repeated, her tone changing. She flipped through the papers again, then looked closely at Emily's face. "Wait a moment. Are you Emily Grace Carter?" Miller looked confused. "You know her?" Judge Ramirez leaned back. "Everyone in the state government knows her. She's part of the governor's Social Justice Committee. She helped design the community outreach program and the new police training reform last year." The room went silent. Miller's eyes widened, and Dean lowered his head. Emily said softly, "I told them, Your Honor, I was only returning from a family visit with supplies." The judge sighed, visibly embarrassed for the officers. "Miss Carter, I am deeply sorry this happened. You are free to go immediately. I will personally notify the department." Miller tried to speak, but the judge stopped him. "Enough, Sergeant. You just detained one of the women who works to improve how police officers handle community situations. This is unacceptable." Emily didn't smile. She just nodded politely and said, "Thank you, Your Honor." When the hearing ended, the officers opened the door for her. She walked out slowly, her coat slightly wrinkled, her eyes calm but distant. Outside, the early morning air felt cool against her skin. The city was silent again. Miller and Dean followed her outside, trying to speak. Miller said, "Ma'am, we didn't know." Dean added quietly, "We were just doing our job." Emily looked at them kindly, but with sadness. "I understand. But next time, maybe listen before you decide." Her voice was steady and soft, like a teacher's. She got into her car, looked at the messy boxes in the back seat, and took a deep breath. For a moment, she thought of all the people she had defended in her work, people who had felt small and powerless when someone misunderstood them. Tonight, she felt what they had felt as she drove away. The rising sun painted the horizon in gold. The streets were empty again, but her heart was full of quiet reflection. She didn't want revenge. She only wanted change. She whispered to herself, "Sometimes it takes being treated wrongly to remind us what still needs to be made right." She didn't know yet that this small night incident would soon become a headline across the state, forcing many to look inside themselves and ask what justice truly means. But for now, she just drove home, calm and silent, ready to rest, unaware that her name would soon be on every news channel by morning. When Emily stepped out of the courthouse, the first light of dawn touched the quiet street. She stood for a moment, breathing the cold morning air. The world felt calm again, but inside her heart, there was a quiet ache. She had been humiliated for no reason, and yet she didn't want revenge. She wanted understanding. Sergeant Miller and Officer Dean followed her out. They looked unsure, like two students who had realized they made a serious mistake. Miller took a deep breath. "Miss Carter, I truly didn't know. If I had known who you were..." Emily stopped him gently. "That's the point, Sergeant. You shouldn't have to know who someone is to treat them with respect." Her words were soft, that they hit deeper than anger ever could. Miller lowered his eyes and nodded quietly. Dean, the younger officer, looked pale. He whispered, "I'm really sorry, ma'am. I shouldn't have spoken the way I did." Emily gave a small nod and said, "Apology accepted. Just learn from this. You wear the badge for a reason." Then she turned and walked toward her car. When she sat behind the wheel, she looked around at the mess left by the search. Papers were scattered, boxes were half open, and some of the food packs had rolled to the floor. She picked one up, smiled softly, and whispered, "It's okay. I'll fix it later." Then she started the engine and drove toward her apartment. She reached home as the city began to wake up. Before going to bed, she received a call from an old friend, Governor Matthews, who had already heard about the incident. His voice was full of concern. "Emily, are you all right? My office just called me. They said you were detained last night." Emily sighed. "I'm fine. It was just a misunderstanding." The governor's voice hardened. "That's not a misunderstanding, Emily. That's the kind of behavior you've been trying to stop with your reform work. It's time we do something." Emily didn't argue. She knew he was right. By morning, the news had already spread. Reporters started gathering outside her building, trying to ask questions. "Ms. Carter, is it true you were arrested for charity work? Will you take action against the officers? Do you plan to sue the department?" She didn't answer any of them. She just smiled politely and said, "I believe in correction, not destruction." Those few words were enough to catch attention. Later that day, Emily went to her office at the Carter Foundation. Her staff greeted her with hugs and concern. They had seen the news and were worried she might step away from her work. But she assured them, "I'm not angry. I'm just more determined." She spent the day writing a detailed report about what had happened, from the moment she was stopped to the moment the judge recognized her. She didn't use harsh words. She described everything clearly and calmly. When she was done, she sent the report directly to the governor's office with one note at the bottom: "Use this not for punishment, but for education." The governor shared her story with the state's Public Safety Committee. Within days, an internal review began in the police department. The media followed every update, but Emily stayed quiet. She didn't want fame. She wanted results. Meanwhile, Sergeant Miller and Officer Dean faced questioning from their department. Miller felt heavy guilt. For 20 years, he had served proudly, but that one night made him question everything. He even visited the foundation quietly one afternoon to apologize in person. Emily was surprised to see him, but welcomed him inside. He said softly, "I've been a cop for a long time, but last week made me realize I stopped seeing people as humans. I'm truly sorry." Emily listened carefully. "Thank you, Sergeant. What matters now is what you do next. Help change the way officers see people like me. That would mean more than any apology." Miller nodded. He later volunteered to join the new community training program that Emily's foundation was building in partnership with the police department. A few weeks later, Emily received an invitation from the State Police Academy. They wanted her to speak to new recruits about dignity, fairness, and understanding the people they serve. She agreed without hesitation. When she walked onto the stage at the academy, hundreds of cadets sat in silence, waiting to hear her speak. She wore a simple gray dress, not a suit. She wanted to appear as one of them, a person, not a title. She began softly. "Last month, 2 officers stopped me. They thought I was someone suspicious because of the boxes in my car. They didn't ask much before they assumed the worst." The room stayed silent. She continued. "That night, I didn't feel angry. I felt sad, because we are all supposed to help each other, not hurt each other. You wear a badge to serve people, not to make them feel small. Every person you meet has a story. You may not know it, but your actions can either break them or build them." Some cadets looked emotional. Even the instructors nodded respectfully. Emily's calm tone carried more power than shouting ever could. After her speech, the academy director thanked her. "Miss Carter, that was the most honest talk we've had here in years." She smiled and replied, "Then let's make honesty part of training." On that day, her foundation and the police academy started working together. They created workshops to help officers learn about empathy and communication. Emily became a key voice in those sessions, guiding young recruits with patience and care. Meanwhile, Officer Dean also changed. He requested to work in community outreach, where he spent time helping families instead of patrolling with suspicion. One afternoon, he visited Emily to thank her. "You could have ruined my career," he said, "but you gave me another chance. That means more than anything." Emily replied with a small smile. "Sometimes a second chance teaches better than punishment." Months passed, and the department transformed. People in the city began to notice that officers were behaving differently, more polite, more helpful, more human. Local news ran a story titled, "The Woman Who Changed the System with Kindness." Emily didn't see herself as a hero. She only saw herself as someone doing what was right. When a journalist asked her what kept her so calm through everything, she said, "I've seen people lose everything and still choose to do good. If they can stay kind, so can I." Later, the city mayor organized a public ceremony to honor her work. The event was held in the same courthouse where she had once stood humiliated. The mayor handed her a plaque and said, "Miss Carter, you turned injustice into inspiration. Our city is better because of you." Emily accepted the award with a gentle smile. "I don't need awards," she said softly. "Just promise me one thing, that no one else will have to go through what I did." The crowd applauded warmly. Many people had tears in their eyes. Even Sergeant Miller, standing at the back in his uniform, clapped proudly with a changed heart. When the ceremony ended, Emily walked outside, where the sky glowed orange with the setting sun. She looked up and whispered to herself, "Everything happens for a reason." Her story didn't end with fame or power. It ended with peace, the kind of peace that comes from forgiveness and purpose. She continued her work quietly, visiting shelters, schools, and police departments, spreading the same message everywhere she went. Respect has no rank. Everyone deserves to be seen. And in that message, people found hope, proof that one woman's grace could heal an entire system.